Perfect. Thank you. You're
Sure.
good.
So hi, everybody. I'm here to answer questions about sex, love, and addiction. I show up here every week at 5 o'clock on Mondays. Everything we do on this
Pacific time.
website, Hmm?
Pacific time.
Pacific time, and everything we do on this website is completely free. We're offering and creating drop-in groups, support groups, information, webinars, all that stuff. And I'm really excited today, as I was just writing Tammy before I got here, that I got to do a podcast with somebody I'm really excited about. And if you haven't heard the podcast, they're called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And you can get them pretty much anywhere, on iTunes or Stitcher or anywhere your podcasts show up. And the good news is how often you get to hear about sex, love, and addiction for free from experts from all over the world. And that's what I'm trying to put together and have them put together.
And you can access all of those formats on
sexandrelationshiphealing.com,
yes,
our
thank
website.
you. I was
That's
tongue
all
twisting on that.
Podcasts.
Yes, but you can get Stitcher, Android, or iTunes all from that. And you can also access all the webinars or all the drop-in groups. So it's a great resource. And there's blogs. There's so much content on there. So we invite you to go there. So
for those of you who come here from In the Rooms, you may know that I also do a drop-in group like this on intherooms.com on Friday nights at
6 p.m.
6 o'clock California time. And Tammy, I want you to know we had 98 people this week. I was thinking almost 100.
Yeah.
So we will get there. But anyway, my job is to answer questions. A lot of you may not have the opportunity to see an expert in this area. You may not be able to afford it. You might not have the time. You may not have the access. I want to make myself and as many professionals available to you at no charge so that we can try to get your questions answered and get you on a road of healing for you and your partner or whoever needs the help. So here we are. And you got some questions to line up, Tammy?
We do. The first person says thank you for the webinars. So they're grateful to both of us. And hopefully you're checking out some of the other ones. I mentioned John Taylor's and Mark Anthony Lord. I told you, Dr. Rob, that last week, Thursday, Mark Anthony started a new spirituality and recovery webinar. So that's another one. And David Fawcett, Kristen Snowden, lots of resources on the website. So first question though, my wife of 28 years disclosed to me in June a long history of anonymous sex, affairs, and one-night stands. She quit her job to sever ties with a recent acting out partner and has since gotten secured employment with a different employer. They're both seeing a qualified therapist. She is in recovery for sex addiction. She regularly attends women's only SA meetings, and I'm working to recover through a therapist. Oops, it just slid, sorry. Through a therapist, guided trauma work and 12-step partner groups. Nearly all my betrayed partner fellows are women. I run across very few men that are seeking recovery the way I am. Statistics on sex addiction tells me that nearly as many female sex addicts as male sex addicts, which means there are likely just as many male partners. And the question is, where are the other male betrayed partners? If I'm seeking recovery through these means, what are they doing? So.
Well, let me answer your question as best I can. I actually don't think the numbers are accurate. I think we see about, in sex addiction treatment and sexual disorders of this nature, maybe about 70% male, 75% male, and about 25% female. And if you look at some of the statistics for eating disorders, interestingly, you'll find that in those programs, they tend to see about 70% women and about 30% men. And I think that in many ways breaks down to how we work through our pain, our trauma, our issues by gender, is women will tend more to act in with food and self-harm and depression. Men will tend to act out more with sex and violence, but that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of women who have been violated, abused, or left with the kind of emotional challenges that lead them acting out just like the men do. But you're right, we have a lot more men who are coming in for addiction, and in fact, addiction in general, we have more men who come in than women. So I hear your pain. I am sad that you feel this sense of isolation. I can imagine that's difficult. All of the people that I know who are doing online partners work are just for any partners, but as you have found, it's usually all women. You know, what I can say to you is we can drop some information and hints out there. If there are people who have a group or are doing something, we'll try to find something for you. But and we may even consider doing one on our site at some point. But what I want you to know is you're not alone. And there are lots of men dealing with what you're dealing with. And men tend to deal with it a little differently than women. Because it's just such a personal wound. And if you want sort of direction, advice, support, just drop us a note. I'm glad to give you some of that or direct you to somebody to see. But you know, here's the deal. I mean, betrayal is betrayal, and you will never look at her again. You will never in the same way again. You'll never believe some of what she says right off the bat again. Many of the characteristics that the female partners experience, you will also experience. But I think the way you experience your anger, and the way you express it may be somewhat different than women do. Tammy, do you have any recommendations? Because
I do, actually. I've had a number of male partners that have reached out, and there's a therapist that I know of that had a group of men that were kind of loosely formulated. I think she was working with them for therapy on one level, but they were also loosely formulated. But it's on my list to have a drop-in group for female sex and love addicts, and I'm working towards getting a moderator for that. But the other one that I'm committed to and hopefully have no later than March is a male partner moderator, so that we will have a space specifically for male partners, because I'm hearing more and more of you going, hey, what about us?
Right.
So we haven't forgotten you. We just have to find the right person.
That's true.
Okay. I've been married to a sex addict for 34 years. 16 years ago, I found out my husband has been seeing prostitutes for 6 years. It took several years to find a good place to both have therapy, lectures, group sessions, and we went through disclosure. That was hard but hopeful time. In September of 2018, I found out my husband had a relapse since 7 years. I feel very sad, understandably.
And I'm not sure, Tammy, is this person saying that the relapse was 7 years ago, or that they just found out that it's been going on for 7 years?
No, I think they found out that, and feel free to clarify, but what I'm reading is that after 7 years, finding out that there was a relapse.
Okay, excuse me, I'm going to turn the lights up, so give me one second.
And a continuation, after being very mad, I can't decide whether I have the strength to stay or the strength to leave.
So maybe this will be helpful to you and to everybody. Nobody's recovery is perfect, and sex addicts, just like everybody else, are going to have slips, and we're going to struggle, and we're going to do it wrong. And every partner hates that, and no partner wants to hear that, but that is the reality, is we may do it again. And I think that what's less important, and I know you won't agree with me right off the bat, but hear me out here, what's less important than whether we have a slip or not, or meaning a unintended return to old behavior, is that we tell you. And to me, this is the challenge that you have, is that, you know, you began to trust your husband again, and you felt like things were going well, and you began to regain trust, only to be betrayed, I think, not as much because he had a slip, but more because he didn't tell you. And that's how trust is broken and lost. I don't expect any sex addict to do it perfectly. They may call that affair partner. They may look at that porn again. They maybe stop off at that massage parlor, you know, and then we're going to have to look at what happened and why and how and where, and hopefully we can help them avoid doing it again. But a relapse is when someone slips, like they return to unintended behavior, and then they don't tell anybody and they don't do anything about it, and they just continue to engage in it, and they go back to the way they were. And relapse is much more concerning to me than a slip, because I expect that sex addicts will eventually make a mistake or do something wrong. You know, we're not going to get it perfectly. But what I also expect is that your husband knows better than to keep that from you, and that he should have learned that lesson the first time. And what I would be questioning is, can I be in a relationship with someone that I don't trust to tell me the truth? That's much more the question than, can I be in a relationship with someone who might occasionally sexually act out and then come tell me? We expect you partners to know. I expect that every addict, if they have a slip, will tell you within 24 to 48 hours what happened. And you're not going to like it, and things aren't going to go well, but you're going to feel a lot better somewhere inside thinking, well, at least now he's telling me what's going on, and that's so much better than not knowing. So I agree with you. I just, you know, I would be uncertain as to whether I want to continue that relationship, because, you know, he is so capable of lying for so long. And that's my concern, is this man so afraid to tell you the truth that he is, or so wanting to keep his relationship with his addiction, or both, that he's willing to continue to keep you in the dark for long periods of time, because that would be intolerable to me. Somebody slipping, somebody making mistakes, somebody, yeah, but not what happened here. Not okay. Yeah, Tammy, did you want to share something?
No, I just was thinking too that I can't decide whether I have the strength to stay or the strength to leave. I totally appreciate how just it wrung out, I would feel, with that too. It's like, I don't know what to do. So.
And I want to say that you don't have to decide now. There's no rule. There's no one saying, oh, how could you live with them after that? And even if there were, don't listen to them.
Right.
What you need to do is take care of yourself. Now, if he needs to live in another room or live in another part of the house or live somewhere else for a while, that's a perfectly reasonable decision. But I would take your time really understanding what happened, how it happened, getting the feedback maybe from the therapists who were involved, and seeing if you can't figure out a different way for him to struggle without lying to you, because the lying will kill off the relationship.
Right. Okay. I'm 90 days in SLAA, female sex and love addict. I keep hearing people talk about being an anorexic. Could you talk about this particular identification within SLAA? And two, if your bottom line is no sex outside of a committed relationship, and it may take a good while to find said relationship, wouldn't that make all of us in recovery anorexic?
Those are two questions. So let's do the first one first. I don't believe, Patrick Carnes applied the term from eating disorder field anorexia to sexual behavior. I don't think it belongs there. I think that anorexia is a very special and specific defined meaning for eating disorders, and that's where that word needs to live. So if you're talking about avoiding sexuality or not, or being a non-sexual, I can understand that. Those are words I relate to. So here's a couple of things. First of all, there's only one 12-step program out of all of them that predefines your recovery, and that is SA. And they say no sex outside of a committed marital relationship. And as a result, I never do, nor would I support for the most part, sending people to SA. Because I don't believe that going from 0 to 100 is the way that you're going to learn how to heal and do your best. In my belief system, and what I see in SAA and SLAA and SCA and all the other S programs, is an opportunity for you to sit down and say, okay, what is healthy sex for me? And what is not non-healthy sex for me? And how can I avoid what's unhealthy and focus on what is healthy? So for example, if you're a single person and you're in any program other than SA, you might set up a 12-step, set up your recovery plan around dating. And I have to check in with other people after my dates, and I can't be sexual with someone I'm dating for more than, let's say, 80, 60 or 90 days, and, put a bunch of rules in place so that you can both monitor your dating but how are you going to go from holding someone's hand to getting married if you're a sex addict? We have trouble with intimacy. We have trouble with relationships, and we need to struggle and learn in relationships by dating and getting to know people and having it work out or not work out, including sex, how to get to a long-term relationship. And so my response to you is I might consider looking at a program for you that involves not necessarily eliminating all sex outside of a committed relationship, but one that allows you to explore your intimate relationships and dating without having a slip. And let me say one more thing. Hey, if you're a 53-year-old married man or woman with 3 children who has a commitment to your mate, wife or husband, to be monogamous, go ahead to go to SA, because, other than masturbation or looking at porn, they're basically saying no sex outside your marriage. And, that's probably okay. Although masturbation is something to talk about and be considered in that question. But if you're a single person, I don't recommend going to a 12-step program that tells you that you have to be married in order to have sex, because then in essence, you're right. You are being sexually avoidant or completely disconnected from sex. Let me say one more thing about this term sexual avoidance. It's not unusual for people who have a lot of crazy sexual behavior like we do and romantic choices that are terrible to say, forget it. I'm just going to stop being sexual and stop dating. I'm going to stop all of it. I'm just going to live my life without it. It's so painful and problematic for me. And that kind of avoidance of intimacy and sexuality, I think, is just as problematic as is having too much sex and inappropriate romance. Because look, we are better in relationship with people. That's like all the research says that, and we're kind of built to be with a person. Now that could be a really good friend, that could be a lover, that could be a husband or a wife, but we do better with people. So if you can be on a path that leads you toward learning how to be with someone in a vulnerable, intimate way, I think that's your best route with a lot of support and guidance.
We were actually talking about this on John Taylor's webinar earlier today. So watch or listen to that one. And I was starting to talk about Dr. Stan Tatkin's podcast too, and the we do, and how we're designed to be in relationships. So lots of great stuff. Okay, I'm going to skip over to the chat. There was a question that was placed in there. I would appreciate examples of consequences for boundaries when I try to talk to my husband about what I need. He turns it into poor me and the marriage won't survive, and that this partner is being unreasonable. He refused for my 4 non-negotiable agreement because he won't take the polygraph when he failed the first one, saying he's willing to lose me. How do I set up a consequence? I don't know where to start and how to enforce. We have been separated 1 year, hoping he will get into solid recovery.
So I can see the look on Tammy's face and she knows what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I don't think this relationship's going anywhere. And I just want to be really honest with you. And it's not about you or him. I don't know you and I don't know him. But I know one thing, that when you are a partner who is hopeful that change is going to happen and you're really looking for your man or woman to step up and do the work that they need to do to get well, especially if you're living apart, the only real key to their healing at the start is their motivation. And if your husband doesn't show the motivation on his own to say, hey, I love her and I want that relationship back, I want that family back, and that means I'll do whatever it takes, even get upset or feel victimized, or, when someone is willing, and, he should be coming to you and saying, I've been working on this, and will you talk to me? Will you see me? Can we start working on, not dragging his feet about basic relationship priorities. So if it were me in that situation, I would be questioning whether I was involved with someone who had the capability or capacity to get well. Or maybe this is somebody who's already moved on to their new affair and their new whatever, and they're just still holding on to you at a distance. I wouldn't be looking for polygraphs in this situation. I would be looking for reasons to stay. And I don't hear from what you've said a whole lot of reasons why I would want to be in a relationship where I have to drag my partner into doing the basic things to show me that they're not going to hurt me again. That's just basic. And I realize that the fear and pain of being alone or parenting alone, or I don't even know if you have those resources, but you said that you have been separate for a year. My question to you, and I would be discussing this in therapy, is why would you want to go back? Because I'd want to go back only if I saw someone who was, I'm trying as hard as I can, and I'm doing everything, and I'm doing what I need, and polygraph, no problem, and what do I need to do? And because I want this marriage back, I want this family back, and I'll do what it takes because I had it my way without you knowing for a really long time, and now I don't get to have my way anymore. And that's something I'd like to keep having. So if your husband wants to have his way more than he wants to be humble and show humility and begin to work on this, knowing the pain he's caused you and your family, I'm not sure that you're going to be able to make this one work. You cannot recover for him. You cannot make him recover. You cannot, all of your love and all of your compassion and all of your caring is not going to turn into his motivation and his willingness unless that's something inside of him. And that's very sad, but very true. Tammy, did you want to add anything?
No, I was thinking it's very true and very sad. So yeah. Okay, so continuation of the male partner. So he was emotionally destroyed, after the initial disclosure, but he's been, he's been doing his work, but as far as I've come, I still have a hard time seeing my wife as a sick person and not a bad person. Wife has a history of childhood sex abuse, parental neglect, etc. I understand how these things drive behavior, but how does that relate to accountability?
Okay, well, before recovery, before your wife or any of us work on ourselves, there is no accountability. It's only looking good on the outside and protecting my secret life. That's really what it's about. And once the secret life is unveiled and you know about it, And if I say that, well, I'm willing to work on it and I want to do this and I want to, then accountability starts to come into play about changes in behavior and new actions and new activities. So accountability from the past, I wouldn't expect many active addicts to be accountable to anyone except what they want when they want it. But I would expect someone who's in recovery, who's working on themselves and says that they want to be back in a relationship, to be very accountable about their behavior, their time, their struggles, and being very open now with you, as they should be. And as you just heard, we just heard a woman who has a partner who's not that motivated, not that interested. Won't you just leave me alone? And I am who I am. Well, that's someone I would divorce. So I would divorce. So, and quickly. So, if you're in a situation where your partner understands your pain, she is doing her best to try to show you her motivation to be accountable to the process. That's about all you can expect at the moment. But I want to say something to you about the past, because you mentioned this. It's not your job, especially in the beginning, to do any forgiving. Forgiveness can take years for a partner. I wouldn't expect you to not stop being angry at her, especially in the first 6 months or so. I wouldn't expect you to, I think that, it is maybe for a while now, other people's job to have compassion for your wife's wounds and injury. You're angry at her. It's her therapist's job, her sponsor's job, her friend's job, her clergy's job to be her friend and support her. It may just be your job to be angry at her for a while. And you can tell her that, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter how well you do it, I'm probably going to be angry at you for a while and I'm not ready to get off that. And when I am, I'll let you know. And so she still needs to do the work she needs to do for herself, not for you. And if she keeps doing that, maybe in time, as you work on this, you'll become less angry and more compassionate. But there's no one in this room who's been sexually and romantically betrayed, none of us, who have had a partner tell us that after years of what we thought was being faithful, and then have them tell us that this is all related to their childhood trauma, abuse, and all of that. And then we just felt, I don't think any of us ever felt like, oh, well, I understand why they had sex with all these people and ruined my life because this happened to them. No, I'm furious and I want to kill them. It's up to other people to have that compassion. That will come for you over time. Let yourself be angry. Let yourself not be forgiving for a while. Let yourself not be encouraging of her recovery, and let her know that maybe right at this moment you need to rely on your friends, your therapist, your sponsor, and that she can't really be the friend that she would like to be to you, or you to her, not until some of this pain is worked through. And we recommend to couples that when you have found out about betrayal and you're starting this journey, that each of you find other significant people in your life to rely on. Now, that might be your mom, that might be your sister, that might be a pastor, that might be a therapist, but understand when the person you love that you live with has destroyed your faith and your trust, you can't really turn to them and look for help, and they really can't turn to you. And here it is, you've been married, you've been used to turning to each other as your primary source of support. Well, in this situation, that's not going to work. She has to turn to her people, nothing sexual and nothing romantic, and you have to turn to your people, nothing sexual, nothing romantic, to work through some of that pain and hurt. And then you can begin to turn toward each other when you've got when you each have solid support systems of your own.
So, and one of the things, at the beginning of the meeting, I was talking about all the different resources that Dr. Rob has created on the sexandrelationshiphealing.com website, and those drop-in groups and these webinars are so that you have a safe place to connect with other people who have been through this. And I'm going to share this, and sometimes people appreciate this, I'm sure sometimes they don't, but the American Society of Addiction Medicine has a short definition of addiction on their website, and you may want to go look at that because it's not an excuse, but it helps with the reason. And it talks about, that they make poor cognitive decisions. And, it gives all the list of like all the behaviors you've probably experienced with your wife, as you're dealing with all of this. And it doesn't make any sense from anybody looking out at it, but it's an addiction. And just like alcoholism is not about alcohol, sex addiction isn't about sex. It's about escaping.
And it isn't about you. I mean,
right.
It isn't that you didn't have good enough sex or you weren't have a big enough penis, or it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about the brokenness inside of her that doesn't allow her to be close to you or remain close to you. She keeps running away and looking over there and looking over there for shiny pennies, when what she probably wants is right there in front of her with you, but she can't grab it because she's broken. And you know, even, and it's painful because there we are holding out our buffet of love and care, and our partners are running away from us, and we think, what's wrong with the love and care I'm giving? Probably not a lot. What's wrong is this person can't take advantage of it. And so you're left holding out a tray that no, you know, by yourself. Yeah,
I'm
but I
going,
do
what?
hear, go ahead. Anyway, we got lots of questions, 7
Yes.
of them here.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
so the next one, and I'm going to answer this one. Do you have support groups for betrayed wives? Yes. On alternating Wednesdays at 12:30 Pacific time, Brittany moderates that particular one. We're looking to offer some in the evenings as well, but there is one on alternating Wednesdays. So, and that is a different format. You'll get to see each other if you decide to have your video camera showing. You don't have to, but if you decide to connect in that way, you can. But that's an opportunity for you to have a conversation. So yes, there are those opportunities, not as many as we want, but
We're getting there.
we'll
I mean,
get there.
I think what you need to hear, for those of you just joining us, my goal is to create an environment online where you can get help for free. And I figure if I offer most of you drop-in groups for addicts, drop-in groups for spouses, educational experiences, information about healthy sex, drop-in groups for couples, drop-in groups for spirituality, places where you can see each other, or, you know, put your finger over the camera just like this, and you can still show up and talk to people. But being with the people who are struggling with what you're struggling with is what makes this healing powerful. And you may or may not be involved with 12-step programs. You may or may not feel comfortable going to them or have enough of them available. We are fully supportive of that. But outside of that, it is often useful to have a place just to talk about this. And I know that there aren't that many therapists that may offer you these things, and or you may or may not have access to it, or you may not be able to afford it. So we are giving this away for free. I encourage you to take advantage of it. We are not doing therapy online. These are supportive drop-in groups and educational experiences, so you can begin to get the support that you need.
I'm going to skip over to the chat because there's a question in there. So
Okay.
there's a single female in their 20s who's avoiding sex or any sexual contact because of trauma that happened when I was a little girl. I'm a porn addict, been to therapy and all that stuff, but I'm still scarred. I'm also an SAA. What advice do you have?
Well, I'm not sure what the question is. Sound like all of us. You have lots of trauma. You're, I'm sorry, did she say that?
I'm avoiding sex or any sexual contact because of the trauma, but as a porn addict working on therapy.
Oh,
So what
okay.
advice would you suggest for reintegrating into life?
So there are people, just to say it for the group, who have the kind of trauma that leaves them not wanting to be with people at all sexually. It's too scary. It's too overwhelming. Some people drink and use over that. They just can't tolerate the intimacy of it, or it terrifies them, or they're never turned on, whatever those issues are. Some people just turn to porn, and then they become really, really addicted to the porn because it feels like it's meeting that deeper need for connection or comfort or distraction, at least for the moment. But once you put the porn down, and you have to put the porn down and completely, utterly, and entirely, and maybe masturbation for a while as well, the thing that you have to do is work on your friendships. This is how you grow into sexual intimacy and romantic intimacy, is by building deep and enduring, meaningful friendships with people in your recovery, with people in your therapy groups, with people who know everything about you, your whole history, and they love you anyway. You know, we used to have a saying in one of the programs, the 12-step programs, that if you want to have a partner whom you're sexual with and you love, buy a plant. You know, if you keep the plant alive, buy a kitten. If you can be responsible with a kitten, buy a dog. You know, so in other words, if you can be responsible to and responsive with and something in your life like that, then you might be ready to be responsive to and in a relationship. So it's sort of the same thing. If you're being engaged and responsive in your friendships, in your support groups, and really getting your emotional needs met by a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, then there may be time to begin to look at sexuality. And I want to say this, you know, some people think that sex is putting one part of a body into another part of a body. And I don't think that's what sex is. You know, there's a lot of stuff like holding hands and kissing and being intimate, romantic, and a lot of those things are maybe doable for you, except at a certain point you start to feel uncomfortable. And it will only be in the in re-engaging your sexuality after you have solid friendships and you've gotten away from the porn, by beginning to date and seeing where the fear comes up and where you disappear. And, you know, it's a process of learning. It's sort of like, I know this is not a good example, but I'll make it anyway. People, they used to think that people who had the fear of flying, that if you talked them through it, if you worked on it with them, if you talked about, showed pictures of airplanes, made airplane noises, that somehow they'd be able to get on a plane. And that never really worked. And eventually what we learned was, for people of those kind of phobias, you actually have to take them on the plane and go on a plane ride with them. They have to go through the experience and all of their fears leading up to it to be able to begin to work through it. And so I'm not saying that you need to go have sex with a stranger, please don't. But I am saying you may need to learn how to hold someone's hand, how to enjoy their company, how to go on dates, how to be romantic and romantically sexual before you actually get to actual sex. And all the way along, you'll be learning and growing and checking in and looking at trauma. And it's a process. So let yourself not be sexual for now while you're working on trauma and putting away the porn. It's not unusual for us to take 3 to 6 months out from sex, but re-engaging the sexuality, re-engaging your attempt to connect with another person intimately is healthy. And that needs to be supported, because ultimately, you know, we do better with somebody.
How does one get an actual diagnosis? I strongly believe my partner does have some sort of sexual or porn addiction, and he agrees to some extent, but doesn't think it's bad enough to seek help. He thinks he can do it on his own and with my help. I have no idea what I could do to help him. I feel like I need help coping with all of this myself. I would love to make this relationship last, but sadly, I'm not sure where we will end up. I love him and will be here for him, whether as a friend or as a partner. Only time will tell. Can people fight this on their own, or does he just, or is he just trying to smooth things over for now and buy himself more time? Is there anything that I can do to help?
So I'll just give you the best answer I possibly can. There are many things, almost all things, that you can create on your own if you're inventive enough and creative enough. You can create a career, you can create an education, you can create a baby. You know, there are many, many things you can create if you're clever and smart enough. But one thing for sure, other than the baby, that you cannot create without other people is recovery. The underlying issues for us, those of us who have these issues, is we struggle with intimacy, relationships, connection, and ultimately just our attachment to other people is very uncertain for us in a lot of different ways. And not only does that have to be acknowledged, but it has to be rigorously worked on. So, and if you can imagine this, you know, a person who has a problem with food probably needs to work on the way they eat in order to be a healthier eater. In the same way, someone who has a problem with relationships and sex needs help working on that in order to do better. Your job as a partner is to love him, to appreciate him, to value him, to be kind to him, and if he hurts you, to let him know. And it sounds like you've gotten a lot of hurt when I haven't heard your expression of that, but I sure hope you are expressing it. It may well be that the only way he's really going to get it is for him to understand how much pain he's caused you. But in any case, getting it means, in any addiction, in any compulsive behavior, period, trust me, 25 years of work in the field and 35 years on my own, and I can tell you this, we cannot do this alone. We need other people who have done the work before us, who are a little ahead of us. We need role models, we need guides, we need friends, we need sponsors, we need companionship and fellowship. If you're a man, you need to get involved with other men and get their support, their understanding and direction. If you're a woman, you need to find that with other women. But we need to find a community of healing in order to get better. In fact, if you said to me, my husband's going to individual therapy, but he doesn't want to go to group and he doesn't want to go to a 12-step meeting, he wants to just do this with his therapist, I would probably say to you, that's not good enough. And so you're telling me he just wants to do it with you. And I'm going to tell you that love is not enough to heal addiction. It takes a skill set, and it takes training, and it takes experience. And you don't have that, nor should you. But if your man is not willing to take responsibility for his problem, taking responsibility for an addiction means I go to seek out help from other people and I take their advice and direction. If he's not willing to do that, then I think you are right to say, I don't know if this is going to work.
You asked about a diagnosis, and there's a self-assessment. So it's not a diagnosis, but on sexandrelationshiphealing.com under the blog sections, and if you search for assessment, you'll find it, but there is an assessment that he can take. There's other resources too. I highly recommend Dr. Rob's book, Sex Addiction 101. It kind of lays everything out, and if he sees himself in that, then hopefully he would decide that getting some qualified help and doing the things that Dr. Rob just mentioned would be in line. So,
but don't waste your time thinking that you can fix his problem. You have enough problems. You live with him.
Given all that sexuality, I even put glasses on so I could read
I
this.
noticed I've never seen your
I
glasses.
know. I got
like
new contacts, and I was like, oh, I don't think they're working for
I
reading.
like your glasses.
Well, these are just little readers. But given all that with sexuality, it's so hard to even think about having a sexual relationship with an SA spouse after all the lies and horrible behavior. Does that feeling ever go away?
I think trust can be restored, and I have seen partners again feel romantic and sexual toward the person who hurt them. I actually think it's counterproductive if it happens right away. I have seen partners who found out about his or her sexual behavior or romantic and said, oh, well, I'm just going to start having a lot of sex with them to keep them from doing that. Or if I have great sex with them, they have no need to go where else, and all of that. I've seen some partners want to be sexual with a sex addict right away because, well, now I know everything and I feel closer to him or her, and so now I want to be sexual. I think those are all bad reasons. So here's my answer to you, and I write a lot about this in some of my books. My basic answer about sex in a relationship when there's been betrayal is, I don't think it's a good idea to be sexual with someone you don't trust. In fact, in life, it might not be a bad idea to not be sexual with people you don't trust. So if this man is important to you and you don't feel trusting of him and you think he could easily hurt you again, why would you feel like having sex with him? And he should not be asking you for sex. He should not be demanding sex. He should be humble and grateful that you've even stuck around. So yeah, I think, let's give you a timeline. If he's doing all the right stuff, getting support, being more honest, showing up, being honest, showing up, being present in your marriage, you feel him being there, over time, you're going to start to feel closer and closer. And if you don't over the course of about a year and a half, then it might be time to go into therapy and say, gee, we've worked through a lot of the betrayal issues, but I just lost all my sex drive, because who knows why that is the case. But if you are regaining trust, growing together, he's done a lot of work, you've done a lot of work, you've started doing work in couples, you're really getting into it, your sexuality should appear here and there. In fact, I've had a lot of partners get scared by the fact that they again felt sexual toward their partner because they thought, shoot, if I'm sexual with him or her, I'm going to get more involved and I don't trust him or her yet, and made the decision not to be. So, it may simply be that you don't feel safe yet. And I would really give yourself a lot of room to not feel safe for a while.
Well, and I was thinking when I was reading this, I wonder how much support you're getting through this entire process. It sounds like he's doing what he needs to do, maybe. But, I'm also wondering if you're getting support so that you've got a safe place to talk
Be
about
angry.
your feelings. Yeah,
be angry.
Absolutely. So encourage you to, tap into the good resources. So
yeah, and let me say one more thing about that, Tammy. So you'd be a perfect person to drop in to stop in one of the drop-in groups for spouses, because that's the question you want to ask. Hey, ladies and guys, you've all been betrayed. Your life's been turned upside down. How do you feel about sex? And you're going to get a whole bunch of answers, not from the professionals, which is nice, but from the people who are struggling just like you are. And again, that's why we set up sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Tammy?
Well, and I've done a couple of the partner ones, and I thought one of the most profound things was somebody shared what they did, and they said, and it didn't work. I would encourage you not to do this. And I thought, that's such a valuable lesson. You don't have to repeat the thing that this person thought was, not ideal and kind of a mistake, but, and had some consequences, but they shared that so that the next person didn't have to do the same thing. So it was great. Okay, so my husband relapsed and is trying in recovery again. Should he disclose to me how long he relapsed? He says he can't remember when he started his relapse. This makes me worry he didn't stop or isn't really ready to be honest. I just want to know the truth, no more surprises.
Do you know if this person's in therapy or working on or
It
any of
says he is trying in recovery again, but yeah, it doesn't say if he's in therapy or attending 12-step meetings, what recovery looks like for
well,
this person.
we do have a process called disclosure that those of us who are trained in sex addiction treatment provide some of the time when a partner is really has really done some of their work, gotten their support, feel more grounded, have the plans for taking care of themselves and people who can help them with that. We will ask an addict to disclose his or her entire history of what they did that their partner doesn't know about. And I don't know that it's helpful necessarily to get it in dribs and drabs. I think it's much better in some way to say, hey, I want to sit down on this date and I want to hear what's happened and I want you to go to a therapist and write all that stuff out and I'm going to get some support and be ready. In other words, we do a process in therapy called disclosure, which is really carefully calculated and organized to keep you safe and to make sure we get the truth. And in fact, you heard someone mention a polygraph. For some of us, we polygraph are the people who are doing the disclosures because we can't tell if they're lying or not. And oftentimes I have a partner who says, he or she has lied to me so many times and I really want to believe them this time, but I don't think I can until I absolutely know. And so, you have a right to know as long as you are taking care of yourself and are intending to go forward with the relationship. There are many means to learn about how to do disclosure. And I wrote about it a little bit in Sex Addiction 101, but Tammy could also probably refer you to therapists who can help you and your husband or wife through that disclosure. But in answer to your question, more directly, one of the reasons we do disclosure in a formal way with a therapist is because it's not unusual for a sex addict to have acted out so much for so long that they really don't remember when it exactly started. And so part of what we do before we do a disclosure to a spouse is we, the therapist, work with them for weeks sometimes on, well, what about when you were in high school? What about when you were in college? What about you're in there? What about when you were working there? What about when you're living here? What about when your first baby was born? And we're going through a very intensive timeline with them as a part of therapy so that their disclosure can be complete and so they can really understand when they started back and when they didn't. And honestly, who knows if your husband ever even stopped? I mean, I don't know. But I do suggest that if you're going a second round on this tour and he's already told you this and you've already gone through it and now you're back through it again, that you get a really good professional who knows what they're doing because it may well save your relationship.
Can you talk a little bit, because there's no more questions, so if you have other questions, but can you talk a little bit about like some emergency disclosures? Like what would be something precipitating when there's a need to, like, you need to know this part now, even if there's a formal disclosure later?
Well, in working with partners, I understand that you want to know everything and you want to know it now. And I also know that to do that for you and with you is often to hurt you more because until you have the support, until you have the plans, until you have the people in place to support you, you feel like you'll feel better knowing, but it's going to be devastating. And so where are you going to go at the end of the day? You're going to go home to him or her. We want to plan everything out right down to what you're going to do that day. I'm sorry, but what was the
What kind of an
question?
emergency disclosure? Like
Oh,
when
right.
would you
Thank
go,
you.
like this part you need to know now,
Right.
even if you tell the rest later?
So there are always some things that I consider to be something that needed to be disclosed right away. And if I had someone I was treating an addict or someone who was being unfaithful, these things I required if I was going to see them. So if they have any kind of STD or any kind of disease that they may have passed on to you, and they find out they do, they have to tell you. So all my clients are required to get tested because half the time they're thinking, well, I can't get a disease if I have vaginal sex, but I can if I can't get it, I can get a disease with vaginal sex but not oral sex. Well, you can get a disease with oral sex. So sometimes, or people will say, well, I don't have HIV, so I'm fine. Well, you may have a whole bunch of other things. So all of my clients require STD testing, and if they have something positive, it goes right to the spouse, and they have to tell the spouse. End of story. Um, if there is something going on that would specifically devastate you, like it was your sister-in-law, or it was someone like your secretary at work, or someone you knew well, and you as a spouse might end up confiding your pain in that person. then you need to know, because I don't want you turning to your neighbor or your sister-in-law or whatever and talking about this when they're the person who's involved in the infidelity. So the third arena in which I've always felt, so if your physical safety was at risk, if your emotional safety is at risk because it's someone close to you and you need to really put up a boundary with them so that you're safe, or if there's anything that your children might be vulnerable to. So if if the guy tells me, I leave porn on all the time and I guess my kids look at it, I don't know, I just leave it on the computer, I want you to know that your kids may be exposed to porn. So if children are at risk, if you are at physical risk or you're at emotional risk for turning to someone who might also be betraying you, I will tell you right away. I won't, but I will make your spouse do it. Outside of those circumstances, disclosure is a 6 to 8 week process to really get on board and work on, provided you're going to therapy every week and you're working on it.
Well, I think it's really important too that the behavior has stopped, because otherwise it's just going to be the repeat disclosure. So you do want a period of time where you can see that there has been some change and there's some plan in place that's being executed for making life different. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
and let me jump on that. So
Go ahead.
what Tammy's saying more concretely is, I don't want you guys working on this while he's still seeing his girlfriend, while he's saying, well, I've gotten rid of her, but I just haven't written that letter. I want to close the doors and open the right ones. So I want to put you and your relationship in the best light for this disclosure and for your emotional health and also for the health of your coupleship.
Yeah, because if you don't have tools to replace what the addiction was doing for you, you're going to repeat. So. Okay, so hubby gave me disclosure 3 months ago, and since having it, there have been more lies that have been uncovered. Therefore, truthful, 100% honest disclosure has not happened yet. The hubby has been in recovery, that's debatable, 5 months now, and I'm still waiting for a proper disclosure. Our CSAT therapist reassures me to be patient. The truth will come out eventually. How long should a person have to wait for the SA partner to be honest and truthful?
Well, every therapist has their own way of working, and we get guidelines in the CSAT, but there's no, you have to do it this way. I think it's suffering for a partner to not know. And I think if a partner is doing his or her best to get the support that I want them to have before hearing disclosure, 90 days is the most I would make someone wait. I would make someone wait. And I don't quite understand what you said about disclosure being given previously, because if it was given in a therapist's office, it's a very different thing than if he just said, well, here's what I did. If disclosure was, here is everything I did and leave me alone, and then now he's in therapy, you can expect there's things you didn't know about. But if a formal disclosure was done with a therapist in a process of doing all this work, and he lied to you through that really makes me worried for your relationship, because disclosure is not an idle thing that we do. We're very, as you can hear, very careful about it. And the last thing we ever want to do is do it again. And I have to say that for spouses and partners of addicts and those who cheat, one of the most profoundly painful things in trying to heal is when you get what I would call staggered disclosure, meaning you find out that he or she was in a motel with so-and-so because you found the bill. And you go to them and you say, well, what is this hotel bill? And I think you were with so-and-so. And, and they say, okay, I was. But then they don't tell you anything else, because that's what you knew and that's what they tell you. And they don't tell you about all the other stuff because you don't know about it and they want to keep it a secret. And then 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 days later, you find out more. And you go back to him or her and say, well, wait a minute, I found out this. What about this? And they say, oh, yeah, I didn't tell you that part. I'm sorry. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed or whatever. But what they don't realize, what the person who's withholding that from you doesn't realize, is that you as a spouse are hoping to get the truth, to get the stuff laid on the table. Bring me, in my experience for spouses, you guys want all the dirty, ugly, messy, smelly, everything, and you want it put on the table so you can figure out how to move on with your life and what you could, and what's happened to you. Unfortunately, the person at the other end is thinking, the less I tell her, the better. The less he knows, the better. And so in between these competing things, unless you have a real process in place, you're going to get bits and pieces. And what that does is just so destructive to a relationship, because if you're the person hoping, again, someday to trust this person, and they tell you what you think is everything, and then you go around thinking, whew, I know everything. I know how to deal with this. It isn't good, but I can move on. And then 6 days or 6 weeks later, you find out there's more. then it's like the bottom dropped out all over again. And then when they say, but that's everything, it's kind of, you have to think to yourself, but it wasn't everything before. And how do I know it's everything now? Here's the reality, and I can tell you this by research. Most couples experience more than 3 disclosures before the whole truth comes out. Meaning, I tell you a bit of this, I tell you a bit of that, oh, you found out about that, oh, I better keep you quiet with this. And the whole thing doesn't really come out often before, sadly, the spouse has been devastated by all of these, I thought that was it experiences, only to find out it wasn't.
So tagging on, said formal disclosure was done via phone with a therapist because there was no one near. And then the whole process has been a staggered process. It has been me uncovering stuff bit by bit over the months.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. And I don't think this is something for phone therapy. And that means if you live in Alaska, I mean, people go to workshops, they go, and we also, you might want to drop Tammy a note and see if we can help find you some. It sounds like you're not getting the support you need. And that's my concern, is I want to make sure you get the support as a spouse that you need. But I don't know. I mean, I don't do disclosure over the phone. I just think that, I mean, I don't want to cause devastation in someone's life when I can't be there to give them a hug or see how they reacted and I've seen phone disclosures where a spouse says, thank you very much, screw you, I'm going to go kill myself. I've seen that happen. So I want you to have in such a painful set of circumstances, I want you to have the most gentle, supportive experience you can. And I'm a little concerned about how the one you're describing is going.
So continuing with disclosure, what is transparency supposed to look like after formal disclosure? I still feel like my spouse is not talking with me about things he should.
Well, the truth is that if you've been betrayed, you will never feel like he's telling you everything that he should. And so your fears that there are things still secret, still being hidden, some of that may or may not be true. We don't really know. What I would look like to you after disclosure would be something like this. If I had a slip, I went to the massage parlor, I called the ex-girlfriend, I did whatever. I did that acting out. Then after disclosure, it would look something like this. I would call my sponsor, I would call my therapist or my clergy. I would talk about it, the addict, get out of my, oh my God, I can't believe I do this. I'm such a horrible person. I hate myself, get past all of that. So that then within 24 to 48 hours after it happened, I can go to my wife or husband, spouse and say, I had a slip and let me tell you what happened. And in describing it, we don't give any graphic details. So we never talk about the size of her boobs or how big his what's its was, or we don't do that because I don't want to leave that image in your mind. You should know if I have a slip. And if I have a slip, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be furious, you're going to hate me, you're going to be unbelievably disappointed and hurt, but there still will be a part of you that says, wow, isn't it interesting that he's actually telling me the truth now, or she's actually being, and that in some small way, even more than the slip, I found is reassuring to partners that at least you're going to hear what's going on and hear the truth. So again, after disclosure, if I had a hard day and found myself looking at some people and cruising and feeling sexual in ways that weren't healthy, that's for my sponsor, not for my wife or husband. If I actually engage in a problem behavior, I need to tell you. Thinking, looking, hoping, lusting, that's stuff for my program, that's stuff for my therapist, that's stuff for I'm going to struggle. But an actual behavior where you, my spouse, thinks, oh, well, he or she hasn't done this in 6 months, but I actually have done it 6 weeks ago, that's the lie I don't want you to find out about. I want you and I to be aligned about when have I engaged in the most problematic behavior that I committed to as a part of my recovery. And the smaller pieces, the struggle, you should not hear about because you'll never trust him ever if he tells you about every little struggle that he has in his head. That is for us to hear. But you absolutely need to know if something serious has happened.
Okay, 2 more questions. So husband has been in recovery over a year now. I cannot accept the reality that he will always have some sort of lust for escorts or other younger females. Does this get better? Will I ever be able to be okay with this and stay in the marriage?
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on what lust means to you. You know, if lust means to you, oh, he must not care about me because he's looking at that woman's butt, that's just not true. We're visual. We're going to look at butts. We're going to look at hair. We're going to look at legs. Even in recovery, we're still sexual beings, but acting on it is a different thing. So, you know, I would gauge your spouse more on his or her actions. Are they being honest? Are they showing up for recovery? Are they showing up for your relationship? Are they telling you the truth as best you can experience it? Or those are the things I'd be looking for, more their actions than their words in the beginning.
Okay, next one. And this will be our last one for this evening. I have been
Oh,
married.
sad puppy.
What?
Sad puppy. I like
Oh,
doing this. We could do this all day.
well, likewise. But we'll do it again next Monday. I
Okay.
have been married 13 years and separated for the last 3. This is from a male. I did partial disclosures when we get into arguments in a toxic marriage. 6 years ago, she found out I had downloaded dating apps from my phone to iTunes, first time of discovery. I haven't lied when asked about things. However, I lied by omission to my acting out. I never physically had sex outside of our marriage. After this discovery, when she would get triggered, the arguments would start. I did a lot of damage by doing partial disclosures, and I don't know how to fix it and get trust back. The last straw was falsely being accused of molesting our children. I got defensive and defended myself verbally. I haven't validated her feelings. I do have some guilt about childhood experiences. I have been attending SA for a year. Longest of sobriety is 4 months. I use porn and cams for acting out.
Yeah, I can understand having shame and guilt about childhood experiences, and I think that's a part of your healing and your recovery. I don't know an addict yet, whether alcoholic, drug addict, sex addict, whatever, who doesn't have a lot of regrets, a lot of remorse, and a lot of things they would like forgiveness for. But fortunately, if you're in a 12-step program, then you have an avenue toward finding the forgiveness and the healing that you need. I mean, that's listed in the steps, and it's very easy to figure out if you take that guide. As far as your spouse, you know, all I can say to you is this, you know, you need to suit up and show up, let your words and actions align. And then, you know, if after 9 months to a year, you are not seeing trust being earned back, then I think it's something to be, you know, then it may well be that what you did triggered something in your partner that goes back to their past. And maybe their sense of trust is thrown completely toward anyone because of what you did. And it isn't just about this situation right now, but it's about a deep well of mistrust that you've tapped into in that person with your behavior. I don't know, you know, 9 times out of, well, I won't say that, 7 out of 10, 70% of the time, spouse's anger, in my experience, is completely justified, completely accurate, and right on target. They may not know how to express it, and they may not know how to get their needs met in it, but they are pretty right to be angry in the ways that they are. But also 7 times out of 10, when you start to show up, be the good guy that you can be, show up for your partner's needs, show up for your own needs, and stop acting out, you know, partners get less angry over time because they see there's just nothing to be angry at. They're shadow boxing. You're showing up on time. You're doing the right stuff. You're honoring your commitments. You're acknowledging your mistakes. That makes it a lot harder for a spouse to continue to be angry. But one of the things I know about addicts, and I want to leave you guys with this, is that we as a group really want you to be not angry, you partners, as quickly as we can get you there. So I'll tell you my favorite story about this, and then I will go. It's about the client that I had who got 90 days of sobriety. What a big deal. He got 90 days, no porn, no prostitutes, none of it after years and years. And he went to his 12-step meeting and everyone cheered for him and they gave him a little chip that said, 90 days, good job, keep coming back. And he felt so good about himself. And then he went to his therapy group, all men, all sex addicts. And he said, hey, I got 90 days, look at my chip. And they passed the chip around and everyone said, good for you, that was great, we're really proud of you. And then he went home. And he said to his wife of 12 years, who he had cheated on for the last 9, guess what? I got a 90-day chip. And she said, big fucking deal. So you got a piece of plastic and I've been cheated on for 11 years and I'm supposed to be happy for you because you've been faithful to me for 90 days. You better go back and think about that one again. And then he goes to his 12-step meeting in his group and he says, oh, my wife's a monster. She's so awful. She doesn't celebrate me like you do. She's not cheering for my recovery. It's not her job to cheer for your recovery. It is not her job to be happy that she now lives with an addict. What what her job or his job, a partner's job, is to be angry, to really get a sense of what the truth has been, to see if they can tolerate living with you and begin to regain trust with you over time based on what's happened. Their job is no longer to support you or be your best friend. That went out the window when you acted out and lied to them. They may get back there over time, but it ain't going to happen for a while. Don't expect it. And with that, I will say thank you for joining us.
Well, wait. I had a few suggestions because the longest you've strung together is 4 months. And, you know, I'm thinking that a higher level of care may be in order. So I would invite you to reach out, you know, contact me via email or give a call tomorrow. But there are good therapists, there are treatment programs, and I'm thinking that there may be a higher level of care needed for you to get sustained recovery and give you the opportunity to work on this, whether you stay in the relationship or not.
And let me just say something about that since everyone stayed really quickly. So how do you determine if somebody needs to go to a treatment program or even a workshop? Or really the way therapy works is this, you know, my goal if you come in as an addict to see me is to stop your behavior. That's my first goal. And so I'm going to see you regularly. I'm going, let's say once a week, I'm going to try to get you in support groups. I'm going to educate you. I'm going to try to make you accountable to me by checking in with me by phone, by text, all that. But if I get to a point where I just see that you're really struggling and not getting better and still acting out, then I'm going to turn up the heat, meaning I might ask to see you twice a week, or I might ask you to go to meetings every day, or I might ask you to see a psychiatrist and get evaluated for medication because maybe there's some underlying depression or anxiety or other issues that are driving your challenges with stopping. But if I have done everything I can as an outpatient therapist, you know, you've gone to a few sessions a week, you've been checking in with me, you're going to a lot of meetings, you got support, you got on medication or the psychiatrist didn't think you needed it, and you're still really struggling with the basic recovery, then maybe you need to look at doing more. And we look at it as a sort of continuum of care, from maybe seeing someone once a week and encourage them to go to a 12-step meeting, or even just having people come here and go to meet, all the way to a residential treatment program. And somewhere on that line, whether it's once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, intensives, workshops, all the way to residential, on that line somewhere is what you need for healing. And it may or it may not be just seeing a therapist. Whoops, lost my light. But within, you know, I would hope with the right support that you should be able to get a year together. And if not, and you're repeatedly hitting 3-4 months and acting out, something's getting in the way, and that needs further support and exploration.
Agree. And I was also thinking you have children, so you need to be able to be supportive and co-parent, you know, with her too. So a higher level of care, possibly. Anyway.
So guys, we're here every week, 5 o'clock California time. I'm on In the Rooms every week on Fridays at 6 o'clock California time. On Sex and Relationship Healing, we have drop-in groups. We have educational groups. Sex, Love, and Addiction, the podcast, is now up to about 30 episodes, and it's pretty cool.
Yes, it is.
And I have a blog that I've been writing for Psychology Today. I have over 10 million reads this month. So there's lots of things that we try to do to help you find what you need for free, whether that's online or that's in podcasts or blogs. And all we ask is that you encourage people to come join us, because it's more of a community if there's more of us here working together. And with that, I want to say thank you, Tammy, and you guys have a great night.
Thank you, Dr. Rob. See you next week.
Yes, ma'am. Bye for now.
Bye.